Hey everybody, how you doing today? Hopefully you guys can hear me. Give me give me a little heads up there. We're all right. Sounds good. Mother Clucker tomorrow. The campground start to empty out. We'll have our streets back. Yeah, tourism here today was absolutely insane. We had just tons of people in there. Half the people were winterizing their stuff. The other half of the people were starting to get packed up to go home, and more people were coming in because hunting season starts tomorrow. Hey there, Old Spice, Monkey Food Garden, Melissa, Coney, Library Lizard, Subdog. Who else we got in here? Midstate Prepper, Dana, Jean. Hope everybody's doing good. Yeah, goose hunting actually starts tomorrow. The early Canadian goose season. Be spooky. Love the Cobra emblem there. That's awesome to all us GI Joe fans out there. Yeah, so everything either boat or anything related to goose hunting was hey there farmer was going out the door today 100 miles an hour. Hey there, whatever prepper, boss hen. Yeah, so shells, boat. In fact, that was one thing that I wanted to mention. Everybody talks about um, how do you want to say this? Everybody talks about that there's going to be marauders and all this stuff after SHTF. I'm afraid that most people just don't have it in the mental capacity to even do stuff like that. I mean, I had guys today that they said, "Oh, well, we want to go fishing. We want to go out on the lake, and we're by Lake Huron here, so it's big water." And they didn't even know. I had to go out and show them how to mix the oil for their boat. So it's like, and I take stuff like that seriously because if somebody gets out on the bay and they don't know what they're doing, they can get hurt. So I got them as squared away as I could, but there's only so much that you can do. So hey there, farmer, watching from the People's Republic of Michigan, West Side, as am I. I am on the Sunrise side, though. JT, Turn Dash Farm, Becoming Dangerous. He has a channel, and he is very firearms related. And him and I share a love for Berettas, actually. So if you get a chance, swing over there and check out Wayne there on Becoming Dangerous. Sub dog, I get it, but those who know little, you know, sub, I agree with that people will get panically to an extent, but I look at it. I've got good people that live around me here. We got solid people. We all have skills. We have sort of a underlying code, I would say, that if something bad happens, we're going to consolidate all our efforts to sort of get through it. I literally live across the field from the chief of police, and I got my neighbor next door. He didn't even know anything about gardening, and now his garden is basically um, sub way past me. He's got like little hydroponics things going on. He's got raised beds. He's just got all kinds of stuff. He's literally turned his entire backyard into a garden. And when it started, he didn't know anything about gardening. He just learned from watching me, and he still comes over and gets tips and tricks and stuff. He'll ask me, what do I need for this or that? And I try to point him in the right direction. But I feel that we have and a lot of it goes back to that old school living that we had around here. Everybody picked up some type of prepping tip growing up around here. All the people that grew up in this area are like that. Grow food, shovel and firearm is that's definitely this too shall pass. Yeah, hand tools. Even now, hand tools, good hand tools. You can't. You're not wasting money if you buy good hand tools. I mean, there's always use for that kind of stuff. The tourists are finally leaving the West Shore. I noticed that today too, but now we got all the hunters and stuff coming in. Um, and hunters are good and bad. Some of them are just top-notch people, and some of them are kind of low on the IQ side. We had ones today that of course didn't have any licenses, came into the shop, needed license and stuff. Literally, that stuff is available. It's been available since March. And here it is, September. They still don't have what they need. I mean, there's an early goose season every year on the 1st of September. This year just happens to be on Labor Day. I would think, depends on how bad it gets. Most likely we'll be completely lost because like 30, and most live in the cities, and people don't have that morality today that they had in the past, and that is something that I think you can see. However, I have seen some extremely moral and decent people living in a very urban environment too, so there's bad people in the country and there's good people in the city. And that's why I always think, you really need to take people on a one-to-one basis, basically. Yeah, I got just checking the chat here. Everybody that's coming in here. Prepper for the ages. Hi, went to the local drive day. Almost no one was out and about. Um, we're sort of in the middle of the season here, so it is going to get our middle of the weekend here. I imagine tomorrow afternoon it's going to get crazy again. Too many from the city moving to the country. That is true, Monkey Food Garden. I'm going to tell you now. For me here, I when I was a kid growing up, and when I was a teenager in my early 20s, if you've seen a half a dozen out of state plates on a weekend in the summertime, you were seeing a ton. I mean, there were summers I can remember seeing a half a dozen out of state plates the entire summer when I was a kid growing up. And now I can drive around any given day and probably find 20 of them here in just, nowhere, Michigan. We're just a little farming area. I mean, we are along the lake shore here, which is our draw. And people from like me, I don't feel up north in Michigan starts until you're way up in the Upper Peninsula. But there's people in Detroit that think where I live is up north, and it's just not. It's just not like that. I mean, especially now, it was much more rural here when I was in my 20s. Now, then I'm as old as I am. 30 years down the road, it isn't as rural anymore, and that really kind of breaks my heart. But Monkey, I moved from the suburbs to my farm in 2020, and that's good. I mean, get in good with the neighbors if you can. Sometimes that takes a long time to get in with the neighbors, and that is one of the things that kept me and my wife here where I grew up locally, because I still know everybody and kind of know what's going on and stuff. It literally takes a decades sometimes to work yourself in the communities. The guy that took me bear hunting in 2015, he was a hardcore Yooper. If you don't know what Yooper is, they're from the Upper Peninsula and of Michigan. And he said, we love it when people move up here to the UP and want to become part of the culture. He said, the problem that we have is too many people want to move up here and they want to change the culture back to wherever it was where they came from. And that is the worst way to make it's a good way to make a bad impression with your neighbors and stuff up there. So, when you move into those areas and you're sort of the outcast, you got to do what you can to blend in basically with the locals. And if you don't like the locals and stuff, you're going to have a hard time getting into that community. That's how it is here. Yep. Illinois vacationers will be gone after tomorrow. And that's the truth, especially in Western Michigan and like Traverse City. I love the Traverse City area. It's got a lot going for it. There's a lot of jobs, but there's also a lot of people that come up there, and they're very, very arrogant. And you see that along there from like Traverse City up to like Harbor Springs. So, like Petoskey, Charlevoix, they are just extremely affluent, and their egos and the narcissism goes right with that. So those are the kind of the places that I would say, you don't really want to be in the middle of those things. Reminds me of something like if you ever read the book World War Z. It's sort of one of those, sci-fi, but it's got a kind of a prepper edge to it, talking about what happens if there really wasn't a zombie apocalypse. And it's said it's not anything like the movie, the one with Brad Pitt in it, but they go through. There's one section where they talk about the survivors of the zombie war, so to speak, and the people who knew how to do stuff. So your people that were blue collar, there were manual labor, there were migrant workers. Those were the people that knew how to do stuff, fix things. And they were trying to teach people who used to be like rich, powerful business people how to do stuff like grow food and fix things and keep machinery running. And those people didn't want to take any type of advice from these, what they considered to be lower class people. that is something that I think that could possibly happen if there was a massive SHTF. People who were always on the top, always the boss, always the number one guy, the one that had the pile of money that everybody, came to, and they were always in charge. Now all of a sudden, all they knew how to do was move money around, and now you got to, work the ground, and you got to fix things, and you got to learn how to live off the land, and they don't know how to do any of that stuff, and they can't just pay people because money is worthless. So now you got a problem. Those people have to take orders from the lower class, so to speak, and you can tell where that would go. Becoming dangerous. I used to be rural where I grew up. Driving through town now broke my heart. How much of it's changed? And that's the same thing in my town that I live in now. I can drive around and I show, my kids and younger people. This used to be here. Like the one younger guy that I work with, I drove past an area this week when we were doing a pickup, and I said, the coal mine used to be there. Coal was mined in this area of Michigan around the 1900. And I said, when the coal mine was done, they turned that into the dump because they basically threw everything down in the coal mine shaft, and that became the city dump. So in the 1930s, 40s, and I think early 50s, that was the town dump, what used to be the coal mine. Now it's just a patch of trees that grown up because everybody kind of stays away from there, and it's sort of private property. So there you go. The snowbirds will be here soon, Melissa. Yeah, and when the snowbirds come in, are they, Melissa? She is in the Southwest, and do when the snowbirds come in, do they usually rent or do they own cottages? How does that all work down there in the Southwest? I'd like to know. The problem with Florida is salt water. You can't grow food, and that's true. And it's also hurricane season starting out as well. Sounds like Chicago, not folks from the rest of Illinois. And that's true. I've been through rural Illinois, and we had great times driving through rural Illinois, stopping at little, mom and pop restaurants and stuff, having something to eat. Because there's different times we went out west to goose hunt in Missouri, and we went to Oklahoma to see some family members graduate the military, the Army boot camp in Fort Sill. Selfish people can't thrive in a rural area, and that's true. There has to be a certain amount of give and take, and greed can never be satisfied, so to speak. Just finished reading The Roadside Picnic. If you're interesting book about people scraping by on a black economy. I'll have to keep that in mind there. Becoming dangerous. Hermit Hill. Sorry, got busy. Just about missed you. Oh, that's no problem. I'm here for an hour, and I'm gonna do this back and forth thing. I want to this week I'm going to do it on Sunday. Next week I'm going to do it on Saturday. I'm going to keep it at 7 p.m., but then I'm going to flip back and forth so it's not always on the same day. So people who go to church and stuff on Sunday have a chance to catch it on Saturday. Own homes down there in Arizona. So if they own a home in Arizona plus some other place, they're not hurting for money then, I guess. But and I think to a certain extent, when people watch prepping videos and stuff on YouTube, they really, I think some people get way off, kind of focus on the small stuff and then build out. If you got enough money to have yourself a small farm, and you got yourself, your equipment and stuff where you can grow your own food and whatever, that's good. But there's certain things that you have to take in mind. Like, no, there's a person I know right now that had some medical problems the last couple of weeks, and he's got his birds, and he's got his chickens and whatnot, and he's had to have another person that I know look after his stuff for him because he's been in the hospital. He can't take care of that stuff. And that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind if you have livestock. A garden you can kind of neglect a little bit, and it's still going to grow. The same thing with crops and stuff. Once you plant them and they come up and they're start to mature, you're all right. You can neglect them to a certain extent. But man, if you've got a beef steer, or if you got 30 chickens out back, you got a half a dozen ducks, you got a few turkeys that you're raising, you got a hog that you want to put up for the winter, that stuff needs to be taken care of every day. And there's no days off when you have livestock. That stuff's got to eat. There's no paid days off or 3-day weekends from that stuff. Either you have to do it, a family member has to do it, or you have to have friends or something take care of it. And that's what builds a lot of bonding in the farming communities, because one farm will do it for another farm and vice versa, so they have a little bit of time if they want to go away for a few days, or if there's some type of medical emergency like what's going on right now. My house was rural, but now I can't breathe. Hope to be out by spring. Great. Anytime you're in central Illinois near Peoria, give me a shout. I'll do that. I'll do that. I got some folks that are in Wisconsin that tell me that, and I have several people up in the UP that have told me that if I'm in a certain part of the UP that I should give them a holler and we'll have a coffee or something. That's something we can definitely do. Even the northern lower, just us up north is one. They're up on in the tip of the mitt there toward Mackinac City. That's where those guys are at. Said the same thing. Yeah, Old Spice. We have no days off. Yep, that is typical farm stuff. And another thing that I wanted to mention, I caught a couple of bag videos and stuff this week. On a lighter note, my mother-in-law, my mother refugee's mother, she is finally out of the hospital after being in for 2 weeks. She's back in the care facility. She's actually looking pretty good, so that is really good. I mean, we were literally driving into Saginaw every day, and from where we live here, that's quite the round trip, well over an hour one way. So, you go there for an hour, you're going to have at least 3 or more hours wrapped up into it, plus the price of fuel around, the holidays and stuff. But she's back. She's back in the care facility now where she's very local. So we can get in there every day. And there isn't going to be quite as much stress on the family to get that done. Blue Ridge Mountains, long-term self-sufficiency doesn't work, but community self-sufficiency does. That's true. That's true. You got to have people to keep an eye on stuff. One person can't really take care of all of that stuff. Um, a couple bag videos and stuff that I seen this week, and they go from one extreme to another. They go from the really small bags, small gear and stuff, things like flashlights, little cord, knife, and stuff, into bigger that have sleeping kits and all that over. And I've come to the conclusion that when it comes to bags and carrying gear, that kind of stuff, if you have enough stuff with you that you can spend a night outside fairly comfortably where you live, whatever that looks like, you're well on your way to having yourself a successful pack if something happens. Because you know what? Things happen. And that's why I did that video here a couple years back where I spent a night in my truck, and I showed people how to fortify the inside of your truck with those little Mylar blankets and stuff, and keep a candle going in there to have a little bit of heat going in there. And I always keep a sleeping bag in my truck during the cold weather months. And I'll throw you guys a little tip here. If you have to sleep in a vehicle and you want to use that sleeping bag, unzip the sleeping bag. I have mummy bags, but unzip that sleeping bag and you turn it upside down so the zipper faces down and it opens out this way. Put that down to the bottom and stick your feet into that, and then wrap the blanket around you as you're sitting there. Then you don't have to lay down on the bag and try to crawl into it and zip yourself up, because it does two things. One, that crushes all the insulation at your back, doesn't do you any good anyway. But if you invert that sleeping bag, and that's the exact same way that you use a sleeping bag in a hammock. So if you put a hammock up in cold weather and you put your underquilt underneath that, which is basically a sleeping bag that goes on the bottom side of the hammock to keep the wind from sucking the heat out of your back, and you put a sleeping bag in the hammock, and you invert it, and you stick your feet into the pocket on the bottom and wrap that around you. Now, if it's really cold, then you throw an overquilt, which for me is just a heavy wool blanket. You throw that over top. You're as cozy as a bug in a rug. I slept outside when it was 20 degrees outside, and it would be 68 or 70 degrees inside my sleeping bag, which is more than comfortable enough to sleep in. Oh, let's see here. Thank God she's I yeah, our prayers have been answered that she has been out of the hospital, very much so. Roaming prepper in here. Roaming preppers on the little chit chats with us when we go on Prepper Now's channel. Hello from Iowa. Oh, love Iowa. North central Iowa is that's a great place to be. You can grow food there. There's still some deer running around out there. It's good to go. Mr. Bumblehill, I have cold weather gear in my bag, throw in the car every winter in addition to get my get home bag. Great idea. And yeah, when it gets into Labor Day, when you start getting into, for us here, when it starts getting into mid-September, you got to start kind of looking at your cold weather stuff, because cold weather stuff, I mean, it's gotten cool here. It went from like in the 90s to like tropical heat to basically now it's been around 50 in the morning. So 25 to 30 degree change in temperature in the morning here. I mean, it was in the 70s. Like 2 weeks ago, it was in the 70s. I went out in the morning like, man, it's going to be hotter than heck again today. Now, I want to put on a sweatshirt for the first 3 hours of the day. Captain Jimmy, another one of my longtime subscribers and viewers right there. I work down near the suburbs looking to do a long hike home with my get home bags. Something similar to what you did. I tell you what, Cap, if you can do a short hike in different sections of that on like a day off or something, have a family member or a friend drop you off at a certain spot, say, I'm going to hike to this next spot, have them pick you up there. You get a lay of the land. You'll start to learn where there's water resources. You'll learn where there's a bunch of different stuff that could be helpful if you actually had to do it for real. The food saver is one of the best tools you can buy. I like a food saver, and there's a lot of stuff that you could vacuum seal in a food saver. You can do your beans, you can do your rice, you could do pasta. But when I say pasta, like macaroni is good, but spaghetti you don't want to vacuum seal, and like penne pasta that you don't want to vacuum seal because they have those sharper points on them like that. What'll happen if you vacuum seal that down, the pasta will actually poke a hole in your vacuum seal and then it won't work. And that's something I know strictly from experience. Hey, Amar, do you have a dedicated? Yes, I do. I have, of course, I can't show it to you. That's one of YouTube's live stream rules. You can't show a firearm, but my truck gun is a Colt LEO 6920. I have an ACOG, which is the military optic on there that's pretty hardened. It's probably one of the most durable optics you can get. I have an RMR on that, and then I have a Streamlight. I think it's an HXL. It's the real big one that I can throw a spot out at least 125 yards. And I went actually out to Uncle Bumble's parents' house, and we were shooting 2 years ago out at the max distance that I could see with that light, which was about 120 yards in the dark. And I was hitting steel, I don't know, 18-inch steel discs with that at 125 yards with that light set up exactly what it was. And then that's my truck gun. If there was an SHTF that took place here in our town and it was that bad where we had to protect ourselves, that rifle would be on the dashboard of my pickup truck everywhere I would go. Military surplus. Military there. I have gotten. Do I have them right handy here? Oh, what do I got? Got a little bit of military surplus stuff. Here is. That's my. What do you call it? The cover for the regular canteen. I got the canteen some other place, but then I've got canteen cup, and then of course I got a homemade spoon that I whittled myself. It's even long, so I can get down in here to eat or stir or whatever it is that I have to do. A lot of military surplus stuff is pretty practical, and then some of it is about as impractical as the day is long. Hang that up there so I can see what do I got back there. Hats. I got a boonie hat. I don't know if you can see it back there. You can see just the corner of it, like right there. That's my woodland boonie hat that Uncle Bumble gave me. It's one of my favorite hats. I like walking around in that. What else do I have here? I got a sheath. This is actually a British military sheath. It's a British military sheath. It's called a frog, and the plastic holder for the Scrama 240 actually fits right in that, and it's got, you can see the little mark on there, bayonet frog. Fits this setup perfectly, and it's got a couple different attachments here that you can run belts and stuff through. You could probably run like a rifle sling through this, so you could kind of wear it on a baldric, something like that. But yeah, there are a lot of good pieces of military surplus stuff out there, but you want to be careful so you don't get screwed on the price. A lot of military surplus price, if they know people are kind of interested in that, the price goes up. Like what do you call it? The military ponchos and the military poncho liners. I can remember when those were like $20, and now if you see a good one, they're like $59, $69, $79 because they know people like that. It's a good piece of gear, so they jack the price up on that. Thoughts on thermal? As hey there, Hudson Valley, how you doing? Monkey Food Garden. Thoughts on thermal? So thermal, like thermal optics, thermal clothing. I gotta ask you to kind of narrow that down a little bit so I know exactly what you're asking me. Thermal optics. I do not own any thermal optics. I do have a thermal camera setup, I would call it. It looks like a square pair of binoculars. That is actually pretty neat, especially if you are hiking out at night. And Uncle Bumble and I, about 3 years ago, we took a hike at night, and I don't know, it's probably like 5 or 6 miles. It was in late September, if I remember correctly. And we would use that when we would walking on the trail we were at. We were getting close to roads because we crossed several roads. We would stop, pull that out. We would look to make sure there was nothing along the road so we could cross the road, send a scout out there. One of us would go up, check out the road, make sure, and then we would kind of leapfrog like that when we would cross different obstacles where we could be seen. And with that particular night that we were out, we actually seen bedded deer with that thermal optic. They glowed like little Christmas tree lights out like 40, 50 yards in front of us. And it was really neat. Those deer had no clue that we were there. And I think even though, because our eyes had kind of adjusted to the dark, but because we had that thermal optic, I think if we really needed to harvest one of those deer in a bad situation, we could have done it. We could have get snuck close enough to that where we could have made what we had with us, effective on that. But as far as a thermal optic actually on my rifle, I don't have that. I have just the old school lights, and then all my serious defensive tools like that all either have a like trillium inserts like the ACOG, fiber optics. The ACOG also has fiber optics on that, or red dots like aim points or RMRs. Yeah, Melissa, I remember. I think we got picked up about midnight after that little adventure. That was one of our. I really had a good time on that particular adventure, folks. The UX military surplus clothing is fantastic, and I've got the old military sleep system with the Gore-Tex bivy and stuff, and you can actually divide that up. It sucks to carry that. If you're carrying that in the wintertime, you need to almost put that in a sled. We carry ours in a sled, but it's very versatile. I mean, if you want to use just the Gore-Tex bivy for something, that's great. And you can use, it's got a cold weather bag and a warm weather bag. You put the two of them together and you put them inside the Gore-Tex bivy. You're good down to about zero, they say, and I've never had it down to quite zero, but we've had it down in the teens, and we were comfortable in those setups. So hopefully, Monkey Food Garden. That's basically what I know about thermal optics. But I would think that one on an actual defensive tool would be a lot of different applications for that, especially for harvesting game animals after dark. I think it would be great for that if you had a spot where there would be those kind of things. Of course, all that stuff is illegal now, but if in a SHTF situation, that's how stuff would go. Tammy, how you doing? Tammy's another one of my longtime subscribers. Hello. Can't believe how gigantic tomato plants are. Yeah, we got great tomatoes this year. Our tomatoes, I grew a smaller varieties, and they have been awesome. I did some stuffed tomatoes just the other day. They were great. We've been eating something out of our garden literally every night for probably about the last month or so. If I ever fall into a ton of money, I'll probably get myself some night vision. But like I said, I got to weigh is $3,500 on night vision. Is that the best use of $3,500 right now? But who knows? Maybe one day I'll have enough where I can grab something like that. Yeah, the military sleep system, Hudson Valley, we like ours. I mean, and usually when I did hike with the military sleep system, it would be one of the components. I would use one of them and then the rest would stay home. One nice thing, if you use the Gore-Tex bivy, you can use that as a dry bag. So you can put all your stuff in the Gore-Tex bivy, then put it in your backpack, zip it up. Now you basically got an improvised dry bag. I love Uncle Bumble's name. How did he get it? That's just his name. That's what he likes going by. Sunset. Hey, Sunset, how you doing? -15 with my buddy Angry Prepper in the hammock. Best night's sleep I ever had. I'll tell you what, if you can set up your hammock correctly in cold weather, you really can be comfortable. I'm a hammock guy. I enjoy sleeping in a hammock. Tennessee. They sell a lot of heirloom scenes at Dollar Tree. $4 unless they went to 4. I'll tell you something about those El Cheapo seeds. I actually had my boss gave me some last year that at the end of season they didn't. I don't know. They were those really really cheap ones. I don't know if I got some right handy here. Hold on a second. Maybe I can show you what they look like. Yeah, here they are. The American seed. These were because a lot of times this stuff either gets sent back or they get credit and they send them back. But I had cucumbers out of these right here. I didn't pay anything for them. They were just going to discard them anyway. So it was basically high class dumpster diving. And I planted cucumbers out of them this year. And those cucumber seeds, I had to plant a few extras because not all of them came up, but they were perfectly fine. I mean, the year-old seed, and they were just, they said on them, what does it say on here? Does it say heirloom on these guys? American seeds, coriander, dill. They don't really say. Well, for the stuff that I got left here, it doesn't really say heirloom or whatever on it, but they came up, they grew, and we used them. I mean, so it's one of those things. I mean, how can you complain about free? Sweet Irene Mudbog, and I'm late. Hey, no problem. You're still here, so it's all good. How did you pick up Modern Refugee as the name for your YouTube channel? I am just a refugee from the modern world. I wish things were a little bit like they were when I was a kid, or even maybe back into the 50s. You know, when I talked to my grandmother, she always would tell me, you know, the 50s were the good times. You know, the 50s were the good times. And when I asked her what the worst times was that she could remember, I asked her this probably in the mid late 1990s, a couple of years before she passed away, and she told me that the worst times that she could ever remember, she was born in 1903, the worst times that she ever could remember was the first year or two of World War II. She said you couldn't find nothing, everything was rationed, people were afraid, they were afraid that there were going to be attacks in the United States, especially on the West Coast. And she said there was just a lot of fear, there was a lot of anxiety. You know, all the men were getting shipped off, the women were left here to kind of fend for themselves. There were a lot of, you know, farmer people that had farms. All the, you know, the old men would go into the Seabees and they do the engineering type work. The young men would go into the infantry or sailor or airman or something like that, and that would leave the women to take care of the farm, or the women to go work in the plants or the factories, or see that things got taken care of back here. It was very dark and stressful time, and Grandma always said that that was the worst time. But yeah, I always wished, you know, people would still hang on to those old skills, canning, growing their own food, you know, being able to have a certain amount of woodcraft, learning how to live out in the environment where, you know, where you live. That's kind of how I got the name. I always thought I was a refugee from, you know, the modern world to a certain extent, hence the name Modern Refugee. I kind of took the name when I started my channel. I thought about it for a few weeks before I, you know, decided I was actually even going to do YouTube. And that's kind of how I came up with the name. Hopefully everybody's getting I can't quite keep up with all the conversations going on in the chat here, but hopefully folks are getting some good information from each other as well. Sub dog, I'm worried about getting nice because of trades disruptions. Yeah, and you know, my gosh, if we can't be friends with Canada, I don't really understand that. You know, here in Michigan, you know, we get so much stuff from Canada here in Michigan, and then there's a lot of stuff where there's Canadian components involved. And I'll give you an example. This is when my father-in-law a year ago was passing away from lung cancer. They had such tie-ups at the border. The radiation that the radiologist used to treat the cancers that he had here, you know, he's got his the radiation clinic, or whatever they call that, cancer clinic, is in Saginaw, Michigan. You can look up where that is, not that far from the Canadian border. But the radioactive material that they would use in their radiation treatments came from Bruce Power. That was refined from, you know, how whatever they do up there at Bruce Power over in where is it, Kincardine, Ontario. And that stuff they would hold up at the border for 2 weeks before they would even get across the border. The stuff's only good for a month because it has radioactive decay in it. So by the time that he would get that stuff, it would only be good for 10 days. So they could only use what they would normally have 30 days to use that for treatment. They only had 10 days worth. And that was back in 2020. So it threw people's cancer treatments all out of whack. And they had to try to balance and figure that with that stuff coming over the border. And, and it's that kind of stuff. And that was even before all the trade disruptions and disputes and stuff that's going on now. To me, that's just crazy. That's just playing Russian roulette with people's lives. I agree. Absolutely, modern refugee chat helps each. Oh, that and that's kind of why I started doing this. I had so many people say, "Hey, why don't you do some live streams where you can just chat?" And I'm a bit of a talker anyway, so it really falls in. I like when people ask me a question, I can throw in my 2 cents, and then everybody in the chat can throw in their experiences, whatnot too, and that adds just a lot to our, a lot to the community out there. And the community is, we are a community here on YouTube, and I've looked into other communities like, the gun community, the gun tubers, and some of the other ones like. Uh, just different ones, whatever. And the prepping community really is close knit, and they're not always trying to, one up everybody. I feel that most of the channels in the prepping community are trying to, help people out. Of course, there's always some that, maybe are questionable, but I think most of them are sincerely trying to help people out. Sons, is chemo dilute? I don't really know what chemo is. I could probably ask. My father-in-law turned down chemo because he was too far gone, but they did give him the radiation treatments, and they said that those radiation treatments, you can only receive those once in your lifetime because they bombard you with so much radiation. And in his case, it really didn't do him any good. It would have been better if he just denied it altogether and just went on hospice and went with that, because I think it probably caused him more problems in the long run for the couple weeks that he had left than what it was. And after seeing what he went through, if I had something like that was that far, I probably, for my own personal self, I would really have to think hard if I would even do something like that. Looking out for each other. That's right, Hudson Valley. Online, it feels like there is a lot of preppers, but in real life, I hardly found any. It is true. We kind of, when you hop online, you have a prepping channel, everybody that's watching or throwing comments in your stuff, we're all preppers here. But when you go out in life, there isn't a lot of preppers. There's some that maybe dabble in it a little bit, but really hardcore preppers, I'm sure that there are some out and about in the course of the day. But here in my community, we are all kind of prepping minded here, but that's more from our upbringing. And for us, just canning stuff and having food here and preparing for power outages and preparing for things that might go sideways, in the world. We are all kind of got a little bit going on there. But I was really surprised back in 2020. Back in 2020, I worked for Walmart, and I had worked for Walmart just shy here when I quit a year and a half ago. I was just shy of 30 years when I quit working there. I could do whole videos on that, and I might. And a lot of things that I seen working there that was just completely wrong, and I have no faith in big business whatsoever. But in 2020, it really surprised me how many people lined up at the door to get in because they didn't have anything. They didn't have any supplies. They didn't have nothing. And especially between March of 2020 to about June, every day when I pulled into work, if there wasn't between 30 and 75 people standing outside for when the doors opened up so they could get in to get stuff. And I think people to a certain extent have changed their mindset and maybe look at it a little bit differently. And I think to a certain extent, if there is another SHTF, kind of like what 2020 was, I think to a certain extent it's going to be worse with people trying to hoard and get stuff. But I think some people actually did learn from that experience. Home hospice is the way to go if you can do it. Yeah, that's basically after they said that they couldn't do anything for him anymore. He was on hospice. Yeah, I don't know, chemo. And there's another gentleman here. He's kind of at the end stages in cancer. He still isn't on hospice or anything yet, but they gave him a chemo pill, and that made him so sick he couldn't take them. And he told the doctor, he said, the cancer is supposed to kill me, not the treatment you're giving me. I don't want to take any more of it. And he quit taking it. And that's exactly what he said. This is exactly what he told me. He said, I want the cancer to kill me, not the medicine you're giving me. So there you go. Yeah, I think that a lot of preppers are tight-lipped outside of, YouTube and social media. I think that that is true. Garden greenhouse turned my whole front yard into a food forest, and that more people should do that. I think um, more people should grow food. I mean, so many people have fruit trees and stuff in their yard. They just rake up the fruit and don't do anything with it. Walnuts, it's all over around here. People look at that as a nuisance compared to when I see a bunch of apples laying on the ground. I'm thinking applesauce and cider, and pears. I'm thinking canned pears, apricots. I'm thinking apricot jam. I'm always thinking like that, but not a lot of people don't look at it that way. It's just messing up their yard. Zero Destroyer. Everyone should know that most cancer research is largely a fraud. You know what? There is a lot of people out there that have a lot of alternate ways of treating stuff like that supposedly have had decent success. And I don't know anything about that stuff. But if I was thrown into those type of really terrible situations, I think I would probably look at all options all the way around. Do you have any insight on fasting for prep or just good health? Hermit Hill Homestead. Oh, I don't know if I'm the one to ask on that. I've got my share of medical problems too. I think the as far as fasting goes, a lot of people claim that fasting has helped them. So I would have to think, just from the amount of people that have had positive experiences with it, I would think that fasting was good. My grandmother always swore by, and a lot of the old people did, fermented food, stuff like sauerkraut, crock dill pickles, fermented food. And then my grandmother was a firm believer. She would drink a small glass of homemade wine, like this much, every night. She had the jug there of whatever kind that she wanted, and she had a little water glass like that big, and then she would fill that up, and in the evening she would drink that every night. And she basically didn't have any medical problems except arthritis until she was about 6 months before she passed away. She started having medical problems, but she was 96 years old when she passed away. So she didn't start having, she passed away in April and her birthday was in September. And she was 96 years old when she passed away, but she swore by that small glass of homemade wine every day. So I don't know if it was a blood thinner or what it was, but she swore by it. She loved it. Oh, let's see here. I'm getting behind here. Doomsday Queen on Fridays doing $5 preps. Doesn't seem a lot, but it adds up, farmer. Yeah, I'll have to check that out, see what's going on with that. Many not preppers because 70% of spiritual not paying it. Oh, that's true. I've often thought that a lot of the stuff that you see going on in the world seems to line up with what's in the Bible. I told my doc that if I get cancer, I would refuse treatment. A lot of people do. A lot of people do because of they've known somebody that's had chemo or whatever, and they were just devastated by the treatment. Arrow Garden Corp is partially back. I got my arrow guards here. They work actually really good for lettuce and greens and those little grape tomatoes. God and the greenhouse. That's a good combination right there. Books on alternative healing. And even the old cookbook here that my mom had that belonged to my grandmother. There's recipes in there for antiseptic soap and cough drops and cough syrup and stuff. That stuff was written down from recipes that are well over 100 years old. The old timers didn't have a Walgreens down the street. They had to make a lot of that stuff with what they had. So I give a lot of there's a lot of them home remedies that do have merit. All right, what do we started growing feed for my quail and ducks? Yeah, you always got to keep that in mind. If you got livestock, you got to have something to feed those guys with. Intermittent fasting works amazing well. Clear up your blood work. I should do that next time before I go back to my my next doctor's appointment. They're becoming dangerous. Muscadine wine or juice are great from inflammation. Yeah, muscadine wine. Muscadine is a type of grape, and around here it was actually wild grape wine. A lot of the farmers had tame grapes, but they swore for wine for wild grapes, and they would go out and they would get. And the wild grapes have a huge seed in them, so you don't get a lot of grape, but you get a lot of seed, and they would ferment that, and then they would strain that to take the settlings and stuff out of that and the seeds, and they swore by the wild grapes over the tame grapes. Let's see here. MR, when will you have the book ready? Boy, if I ever had some time to actually sit down and learn how to use this fancy computer, I had somebody tell me Microsoft Word and start, compiling chapters and stuff like that from my notes is really what I need to do. But the problem is, I work every day. So I'm trying to find time at the end of the day and prep and still keep my garden going and keeping things going. What is my prediction for this winter, Modern Refugee from Hudson Valley Prepping and Survival? Well, I'll tell you what, the weather sure turned on a dime here. From as hot as it was, it's more like fall right now, and we usually don't have these type of northwest winds and stuff in August. So I'm thinking it's probably going to get cool quick. We're probably going to have what we call Indian summer, and that usually will come around sometime in October, and then we typically have a January thaw. But way it's looking right now, I think it might be an early frost. If this kind of temperature and I guess airflow pattern out of the northwest, I can see where we could definitely have an early frost. But pretty much most of my garden, I've got out of it what I needed. I just need the beans that I got planted to mature yet, so we can shell them out. And I still got some herbs and stuff that I want to put up. But as far as all my other crops, I pretty much got them around. So I would have to say early frost. Anything could probably be possible after about the 15th of September for us here, and that's kind of my prediction. And I don't know. It's been kind of dry here the last few weeks. So usually that dry spell is followed by, a wet spell. And if that gets into November, I could see where there might be in snow in November. I mean, a couple years back, we had a terrible snowstorm on Thanksgiving. That whole weekend there around Thanksgiving, it was awful. Uh, I'm on chemo. I asked my doc if this was the cure being worse than the disease. I have good days and bad days, but a decent prognosis. That's good. 3AD Scout. I wish you the best. I hope that you can beat it. I hope you can come out of it and be stronger than when you were when you started. Depression Cooking is a good channel. Yeah, I've watched a lot of different, people talking about the depressions, but some of the stuff I watched, I think was a little bit BS to a certain extent, because I've had a lot of those firsthand experiences myself. I see, and so I kind of pick and choose and take what I think is what is right. Feels the same here in New Yorkistan. Yeah, I think we're going to get an early frost, to be honest with you. Yeah, in the 40s. It was in the 40s up in the Upper Peninsula too. Library lizard. We've already had 2 days of frost the last 5 years. Never had to cover up my garden in August. And I want to do a little bit later. It's a little too early yet. I would like to do a kind of like a cold frame, what Mom would call a cold frame. And basically what that is that's a mini greenhouse. You have a little bit of a frame and you have it covered with plastic so sunlight can get in. And typically what that is it keeps the ground from freezing underneath there. And you plant stuff that's really cold hardy, stuff like lettuce and spinach. And then when you have warm days in the wintertime, that stuff will grow. And then kind of when it gets colder, it'll go dormant, and it kind of just goes like that. And then you go out there, like in December, open it up and you got salad greens that are this high. And that's worked many times for me. Last year, I didn't plant one of those, but this year I want to plant one again. So then you can go out there in December, and you can get, fresh salad greens out of your garden. So you get a little bit more out of your garden year round if you kind of know how to play it. Dean Mullins, evening all. How you doing there? God and Greenhouse up near Gaylord in Atlanta. Gaylord got just pounded with those ice storms. How is the cleanup going up there, God and Greenhouse? Get closer to hunting season, our experience some ripping down our posted sign. Oh yeah, that's I always say that there's no friends during hunting season, only uneasy alliances, because everybody's trying to get on everybody else's land. I've already started putting up kerosene. I had really good luck with the little portable propane heaters in the house last year. Just sort of supplemented because I've got access to propane now because I work at the hardware store basically, and I just filled up my propane tanks, and I had small propane tanks hooked up to my small buddy heaters, and we just use that. The furnace keeps the house at 70 degrees, but some nights when it's really cold, it's kind of nice to have the house at 75 degrees, and that's how we supplemented it. So we didn't run our regular furnace too much. We'd run the propane heaters for a short period of time to kind of boost the temperature up, especially on those really cold nights, or we're sitting around, watching a little TV or watching a movie or something, all cuddled up. We'd kick on one of the little propane heaters to stay warm, and that actually really helped. We enjoyed doing that. Plus, you get the little ambience of the light from the heater and stuff. So, what is a winter garden exactly? Sunset. Okay, a winter garden is typically stuff that is very hardy because, like now, going into this time of year is the same as early spring. So, everything that you plant in early spring, peas, radishes, spinach, different leaf lettuces, those things, they don't know whether it's March when you're planting it or if it's October. And what you'll typically do, you'll plant that warm enough when it's warm enough yet so it can sprout and come up a little bit. And then you cover that with some type of hot box or cold frame. And all that is that's a little wooden frame where they have some plastic, or sometimes you do an old window, you set that on top, and you basically created a small little greenhouse. And on the warm days, in the wintertime, because you do get some warm sunny days, that stuff will grow. And then when it gets cold and cloudy, it'll sort of go dormant, and it won't grow. And with that constant sunlight and light coming in during the day, that keeps the ground from freezing. So as long as the roots don't freeze, there's life there in those plants, and they will grow. And then you can actually harvest that stuff in the wintertime. And that's what winter gardens are for us. Now, I know down south, they do winter gardens a little bit differently because they have longer growing seasons. But for us, that the cold frame and stuff is kind of how we do it here, or at least how I do it anyway. They just made crossbows legal here for bow season. Yeah, they did that here a few years back in Michigan here as well for bow hunting for deer. So I hope that answers your question there, Sunset. We wood heat every year, but we also have a small propane. Yeah, we have wood stoves too. I got wood stove out in the shed, and really cold days or days when I am off the whole day, I'll crank a fire up in that, and I'll have a fire going out there I'll have it 80 degrees out in and I got, it's not the most sealed up building in the world, but I still got I can get it 80 degrees in there, no problem. I'm in there in a t-shirt working or doing whatever it is what I need to do. Yeah, Subdog forgot to mention add a hinged window on the top. Yeah. If you got a hinged window and you have a solid frame in the back, you put that hinged window in there, and then you can just pick it up. And I've done it too, where I made the frame rectangular, and then I put two posts on either side, and then I put a 2x4 across. And then what I did is I covered the whole thing with plastic, and then I put another 2x4 on the bottom of the plastic. Then I could pick that plastic up and access the vegetables in there, and that works really good too. And you just have to go out there and knock the snow off if you get a snowstorm or whatever. No, I have never used a RV wood stove, but I do have what they call a hot tent stove. It's about the size of a shoebox, and it works really, really good. It's got a stovepipe about that big on it, and then it's got my hot tent has a fiberglass flap in it where the pipe goes up and through, and then it has enough draw. I made a homemade cap for it because it didn't come with a cap, but that has enough draw then where it can keep the fire going. And they work for a small tent is what they do. And you can keep a small tent pretty warm in there, even if it's down into the 20s. But that's basically what a hot tent stove is. Those I've used. I've never used one in a camper, though. I just want to thank you for about putting up your potatoes. But oh yeah, no problem. Any time I can help out. Just you see one of my videos or you have a specific question, I just try to the things that come to my mind, I try to throw out there so everybody can help, so I can help everybody out, Catherine. But yeah, the potatoes there, especially, I had a lot of people say that they didn't know that they treated the potatoes with stuff so they don't sprout. And not all places do it, but a lot of places do it anymore. Most greens will grow drops to below 12 hours a day. The plants will go dormant but harvestable if weather protected. Yep. Oh yeah, and you know what? Potatoes are they're so good. They're like dry beans, potatoes and dry beans. Boy, if you got access to those two things, you'll probably get tired of eating them after a while, but there's a lot of different ways you can make them too, because both of those things are, they're kind of blank slates. Potatoes, you can make a bunch of different ways. They are like a sponge. They can absorb different flavors. The same thing with beans. If you got stuff like smoked pork, or you got a little bacon grease or something, you can flavor those beans. And the same thing with the potatoes. You got a little milk, you can make mashed potatoes. You got a little piece of cheese, you can make scallop potatoes. You can do a lot of stuff with just those two base ingredients. Just canned 20 quarts of potatoes from our garden today. Awesome. We do the little cubes when I can the potatoes in the quarts. I do the little cubes, drain them off good, and then that water can be put into some soup or something. But then you can fry them. You can use those canned potatoes for a lot of different things. Becoming dangerous. You have a good night, sir. Enjoyed you being here. I'm glad you had time to stop by. Potatoes need a lot of water, especially in the very beginning when they first start to leaf out. Potatoes need a lot of water. They can take it dry after they've done blossoming, but at first they really got to have some water. Put a chunk of onion in each jar. Oh yeah, that's good too, and that's even good with if you're boiling potatoes to use in something else like potato salad or whatever, fried potatoes. Take a small onion and put that in the potatoes when you boil it. It'll give those potatoes the flavor of the onion, but then you don't have the onion in it. That's also a little cooking trick that I learned from mom and grandma. Coney cannon, my second pressure canner load of Great Northern beans, ham. Oh, that sounds amazing. Great Northern beans with ham, onions, and carrots. Boy, oh boy, that sounds like the bean soup that we have around here. It makes me, I could eat that once a week. Nobody else. Yeah, I get grief if I make it too often, but I could eat bean soup. A lot of times, if I go to the local restaurants around here, bean soup is something that's always on the menu at least one day a week. And if I happen to be in there with a bean soup, that's the first thing that I order. Thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you guys. I hope that I'm giving you good advice that helps everybody out, and I want everybody to succeed, and that's the whole reason why I do this. And Catherine, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it. Oh, no problem, Tyler. That's what I'm here for. I do this stuff to help out the prepping community and everybody else as a whole, because you know what? Inside everybody there's a prepper. They're just trying to get out, and I'm just trying to help them out. Like I said, and people, they learn to cook for themselves, they learn to grow stuff, they learn how to utilize the things that are around them. It makes us all stronger as a society, and that's, I guess, the end goal of, or what should be the end goal from people that have prepping channels. Dehydrated potato flakes may rehydrate mashed potato. And also, dehydrated potato flakes are a good thickening agent. If you have to thicken something up that's too runny on you, that's another little quick quick cooking tip there. Well, guys, it's going on about an hour here, so I don't want to keep you guys all night, but I wanted to thank each and every one of you for being here, taking an hour out of your week to spend with us here, just to discuss, basic preparedness and the things that come up in the chat. But anyway, this is Modern Refugee. I appreciate all you guys out there. I all hope you have a safe and peaceful week. Appreciate you guys. You guys take care.